Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Al from easymedicaldevice.com, and today we'll help you to understand more about these new EU regulations on batteries. And for that, I have with me Erik Vollebregt. So Erik, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Hi, Monier. And compliments on your shirt, by the way. I think we are
Yes,
uniquely matched. Actually, I have a Hawaii shirt that also has these palm leaves that you have. You should have told me, then we could have matched shirts
I mean,
completely. Now it's just flowers on my
I'm
part.
I'm celebrating summer because, to be honest, it's the second day of the summer that we have sun here. So it's like
Oh, really?
it's sunny. So I say, okay, let's make some
We are going to
summer.
have some serious thunderstorms tonight in the Netherlands. Actually, they predicted that we will have a downpour of more than 3 centimeters of water within an hour, which is really tropical. So that will be
Yeah.
interesting. We will have flooded streets for sure.
So tomorrow they said also that tomorrow there is no more sun here in Switzerland. So we
Oh,
are it's why we are enjoying. So maybe it will be the same thunderstorm that will come here down later. But yeah,
you are
it's why
welcome
it
to some of
celebrates.
our thunderstorms for sure.
Yeah, let's celebrate when when it's possible.
Mm,
Okay, so as said, Eric, so we will be talking about this EU battery regulation. So
mhm.
this one was already issued last year. There
Yep.
was a lot of I presented that during one of my monthly update of episode. But here I wanted just because we have some deadlines that are arriving for
Mhm.
this regulation. So maybe the idea was mainly to explain first what it is again, and then to explain what people should do now, like scenario again, as we are always talking about. Let's create a scenario of this kind of thing. So first, mainly, can we sit again understand what is this regulation, and is it new, or was it existing already, or it's completely a new thing that is happening in Europe?
Yeah, it's new and not new in a way, as a lot of European legislation is. It's, let's say, it's incremental legislation. So we already had the batteries directive dating back to 2006, right?
Yeah.
But the batteries directive was a directive, so it was implemented a bit differently in different member states. And what this batteries directive did was basically manage the let's say the most basic environmental and recollection reclaiming aspects of the of batteries. Now, what the batteries regulation does is the batteries regulation was proposed as part of the Green Deal. Green Deal, which, by the way, is also completely up for discussion again now. Now that we have so many populists in Europe, that actually
Yeah.
one of their big projects is to wheel back a lot of the Green Deal. So yeah, I feel a bit sorry for my fellow citizens because apparently a large part of the population has, well, let's say, is democratically challenged. But anyway, uh, the what the batteries regulation does, it is intends to put, let's say, a more comprehensive frame around batteries as a horizontal legislation in the context of the Green Deal. So it is, so to say, life cycle regulation. So it completely covers batteries from basically design to disposal. It's complete life cycle, and this is the difference with the batteries directive. And also, what it does is it incorporates a lot of things that are new, you could say, like, for example, extended producer responsibility. So basically, responsibility of the producer beyond just selling the batteries to the market.
Okay.
And also material sourcing, recycling, repurposing, waste management, all of that. And also, it has provisions in there on supply chain due diligence. So all kinds of things that you also see in the social responsibility directive that or actually already entered into force. And then there's the corporate, the CSDD or something directive, which actually was just didn't make it last May, I think. But lots of these elements are already in the batteries regulation.
So
So
in
that's
terms,
that's
when we
basically
talk
what
about,
it's about.
Unearth the pulse of the medtech world with MedTech Conf, a dynamic platform featuring global events on medical devices, biologicals, IVD, and pharmaceuticals. Stay informed, stay ahead, connect, share, and elevate your knowledge. Become an official sponsor. Make your event shine on the map. MedTech Conf, your key to the medtech universe. Remember, the future is now, and it's at your fingertips with MedTech Conf.
when we talk about batteries, so now it's like a famous, if I can say, or trend to talk about batteries, just also because of new vehicles, electric vehicles,
Hmm.
all those new things that we are using now in our day-to-day life to move with batteries. Maybe soon there will be batteries also maybe on planes or whatever, etc. So is this regulation coming for a specific reason out of this Green Deal, or is this because we have now some use more use of batteries on our day-to-day activities? So it's why we had to include some of those things, or it has nothing to do with that.
I don't think it's because we're using more batteries. I think it's because we want to use batteries better and more responsibly. And I would hope that it's also part of, let's say, a more strategic reorientation of Europe, because batteries include a lot of rare materials that we do not have in Europe, but that are available in a number of countries that we do not like to do business with or be completely dependent upon, as Russia, certain parts of Africa. We don't want to be completely dependent on China. So things like that. So it's also basically a way to make the supply chain for batteries also before production more transparent. So people can see actually like, oh, so the rare materials for my batteries were actually dug up by homeless children in Ghana or something. Maybe I shouldn't buy these batteries. So
Exactly.
that's also a part of it. And then it is horizontal legislation. So that means that it applies to medical devices, because this is also the subject, of course, of this whole podcast series. And there are very few exemptions for medical devices in the regulation. There are basically just two explicit exemptions, and then some exemptions may be coming in guidance, but that's not a lot. So that means that basically every manufacturer that has medical devices or IVDs on the market in the union must also comply with the batteries regulation,
So
which
active
is
active implantable devices, if I remember, and infectious devices. I didn't know exactly what means infectious devices, but I thought I read on it. So if you
yeah
have
these
active
these
implantable
these
with a rechargeable batteries, so this is excluded then also from it.
no, not completely
Oh,
actually.
really?
So
No.
there's no uh, because there is the exemption you're talking about is the removability and replaceability criterion, so the R&R criterion, which basically says that so there's the overall R&R criterion, replaceability and removability, and that says that if you have a battery incorporated in a device, it must be readily removable and replaceable by the end user at any time during the lifetime of the product.
Okay.
So that means
Even
that
for a
for,
pacemaker?
well, that's where the exemption comes, because
Okay.
for pacemakers, this is, of course, let's say, slightly impractical. So what they have done is they've said, okay, so there is an exemption in the regulation in Article 11 that says that it's that products that are intended to be operated in wet environments, so that those are exempted, which is logical.
Yeah.
For example, my scuba diving computer, my dive computer, it's Sunto. It's very nice Sunto Ion Core, completely sealed. You cannot remove the battery. You can charge the battery, but you can't remove it. So, for example, this applies. That's an exemption that applies. But then there's also an exemption for certain IVDs and for imaging and radiotherapy medical devices.
When you
Now,
say exemptions means you still have, for example,
the battery does not have to be readily removable and replaceable.
So
then,
do you think just one thing for the exemptions here? Then does it mean that, for example, if I create a technical dossier for my products, I have to mention that I am exempted from this, or you have to explain why?
For example, because then what is also provided for in the R&R criterion is that there's an option for delegated acts to further enhance the scope of excluded devices. And this is where the active implantable devices come. So there are delegated acts underway, and one of the delegated acts that is underway is one that will contain derogations for Class 3 devices. So that will also include active implantable devices.
Yeah.
Hearing aids,
okay,
regardless of their classification, and medical devices that are Class D under the new WE regulations, which means Class D is effective after use.
Okay.
So, for example, let's say that you have a blood glucose meter that you stick on your arm, and it inserts one of these filaments under the skin, right? Then you could say it's effective after use. These type and the sensor contains a battery, then this is also exempted from the R&R criterion.
So when you say there is a delegated act, is it already available or it will come? It's really
it's under development at the moment.
So we can have maybe more and more of those delegated acts with more and more products that will be exempted. So the list is not really final then.
No, not yet. No, but there is the Commission has published a presentation that they held at the stakeholder meeting, in which they are showing slides that exclude also, by the way, Class D. That's one I forgot. Class D devices under the IVDR as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So that would be, let's say, I have a battery-powered test for blood typing, for example, right? That would be Class D. That would also be excluded from the R&R criteria. Yeah.
So again, this regulation is not only for medical devices. So I suppose here that we have specifically the examples for medical devices, but
yeah, these are the medical devices. Yeah, other exemptions
exactly,
are possible
too.
As
you said, battery for cars, battery for whatever other.
Well, these are the other types of batteries that are covered. So if we go back to what types of batteries are covered, so you've got 5 categories of batteries that are covered. So there are the electric vehicle batteries. Well, electric vehicles are probably not medical devices.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they could be.
It could be, yeah.
You could have like a special electric vehicle that is like an autonomous ambulance, for example.
Yeah.
Which would include, let's say, an autonomous surgical system, so that can already start to image you and operate on you. I don't know, it can glue shot wounds or stab wounds shut, or otherwise stabilize you during transport.
So you are thinking in the future, I think now it's like...
No, this exists already.
Really?
I've heard actually that on the battlefield in Ukraine at the moment, there are experimental autonomous vehicles that drive up to the battlefield and that can extract wounded soldiers from the battlefield. And these are unmanned electrical vehicles.
Okay, so
which will actually have an EV battery. So anyway, but and this could be combined, for example, with technology where, for example, you have a system that can make a quick scan of the wounded soldier, and then, for example, glue shot wounds, for example, and to make sure that the soldier can get back to a safe place, stabilized without bleeding out.
Sure.
That would be a medical device.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, but I mean, let's assume that EV battery. So, and if that has an EV battery, then it would be in scope of the batteries regulation as well. There are industrial batteries. These are big batteries. So these are over 5 kilos and also designed for industrial use.
Okay.
Hey, just a second. Do you need a EU, Swiss or UK representative? Then choose Easy Medical Device. We can represent you and also become your importer. Contact us at eo@easymedicaldevice.com.
So then there are light means of transport batteries. So these are typically the e-bike batteries, scooter for mobility impaired people batteries, things like that. Then there are the starting, lighting, and ignition batteries. So typically batteries, car batteries, for example. And then the last categories, these are the categories of batteries that we will be dealing most with for medical devices. These are the so-called portable batteries. So these are batteries that are sealed. They weigh less than 5 kilos. They are not designed specifically for industrial use, and are neither any of the other categories. So not electric vehicle battery, not LMT battery, not SLI battery.
So here we talk about batteries, as you said, made different types. This regulation is for the final, because we are not all manufacturers of battery. We are maybe using batteries, but we are not manufacturing batteries. Yeah. So are we all have to follow that, or it's only the ones that are creating the batteries that have to follow?
No, because if you are, well, I've seen with my clients in the medical devices industry that they are affected in multiple ways. So there are actually medical devices companies that also make their own batteries for the medical devices. And like, for example, I have clients that make like really fantastic power drills for orthopedic use.
Yeah, I work for one of them, so I know.
Yeah, like these really nice surgical steel ones. I've been begging for one for years from one of my clients, so I can flex to my neighbors that I have the coolest power drill in the street, but no luck so far. I mean, the torque on these things is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I mean, these when they make these batteries themselves, they are a battery producer under the battery regulation. But even if you don't make the batteries yourself, but you incorporate them in your products, or your OEMs incorporate them in their products, you may be an importer under the battery regulation. So the battery regulation, like the MDR, also has supply chain regulation, manufacturer, importer, distributor, end user. And like in the MDR, importers and distributors have similar obligations to check compliance of the batteries, regardless of whether they are incorporated in the devices or not. And what is also important is that the definition of battery also covers battery packs. So if this is also something I've seen with certain medical devices manufacturers, that they have battery packs. So they are sealed packs of multiple batteries or multiple battery modules.
Okay.
And these are also covered under the regulation as a battery.
Okay. So in terms of those products or those operators that will be using those batteries for their products. So mainly, if I'm manufacturing that, I suppose I have some requirements to follow. But if I'm buying that from somebody else and I'm importer, I have different requirements to follow. So are there some specific list, or like, here is what you have to do, or?
Yeah, no. Then for the economic operators, there's the what you need to do is that you need to just a bit like the MDR. So you need to hang on. So there are also authorized representatives. So the authorized representative is, contrary to the MDR and the IVDR, not mandatory but optional.
Okay.
Still a smart thing to do, though.
But
And then
again, it's CE marked again because you are talking about.
Oh yes,
It's
yeah, yeah,
CE
yeah.
marked the
No,
batteries.
I should have started there. Yeah, so that is also new about the batteries regulation. It's a new legislative framework regulation. So that's the type of regulatory philosophy described in the Blue Guide,
Exactly.
famous document of which I wish people would read it more.
Yeah.
And so it's built on a new legislative framework template, and that also means that all the batteries in scope of the battery regulation need to be CE marked. It's an important point that you make there, because that means that batteries need to be CE marked regardless of whether the device in which they are incorporated is CE marked. You can have a combined declaration of conformity. That's what the MDR says, that if you have components that are, for example, subject to specific regulations, then you may include compliance or conformity with those regulations in the MDR or the IVDR declaration of conformity. But you need to do separate CE marking in any event, yes.
So CE marking means CE marking like a medical device with a notified body, or CE marking means just you put a C because you follow all the rules, self-declaration?
No, it requires precisely that. And a notified body, for example, needs to look also at your supply chain due diligence to see if it's credible or not, for example. So I think the most interesting thing that the notified body does in the battery regulation, otherwise than check the conformity with the essential requirements of the technical documentation, is to check to issue a verification report that the manufacturer's battery due diligence policy is also in conformity with the regulation. So basically, this is not a naughty manufacturer.
So while you were talking, because I was surprised, I said, okay, let me check which notified bodies can do that. And I checked on the Nando database, and there is 0 notified bodies actually on the Nando database for this kind of products. So I'm a bit surprised.
But this is a report. This is a requirement that is going to be phased in later.
Okay.
So this is also one of the things with the batteries regulation. It is phased in steps.
Okay.
And we can discuss later if you want which steps exactly.
We can even talk about it now. So what are the requirements mainly? What are the things, and how people that are listening to us now should comply to all those requirements?
Okay. So if you look at the timeline, so it started with it entered into force in 2023. Then the regulation became applicable in February 2024.
Okay.
Then in August 2024, so this year soon, the conformity requirement becomes applicable. So that means that the batteries need to have gone through the conformity assessment procedure. There needs to be an EU declaration of conformity for the batteries, and the CE marking needs to be placed on the batteries. And also the lead restriction rules enter into force. So that's what happens August this year. Then February next year, February 2025, the Commission is going to publish guidelines on the due diligence requirements. So this is what notified bodies are going to audit at some point. Then in August of 2025, so half a year later, the due diligence requirements actually enter into force. Also, the marking and labeling requirements. So, for example, the wheelie bin label, so don't put it in common trash. And there will also be an implementing act on the requirements that apply exactly then. So this is also, so watch what the Commission is doing in terms of consultation for these implementing acts.
So
that is August 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah, due diligence, and also the end of life management regulations enter into force. So that is the full extended producer responsibility obligations. So that is also all the obligations that a producer still has after a battery is sold, basically. So that is also recollection, for example. Then a year later, August 26, the general marking and labeling requirements enter into force. Capacity marking for portable rechargeable batteries enters into force, things like that. Then February 27, QR code requirements. So that's basically what we have under the MDR as direct part marking. Then there will be August 27 quality standards, performance standards for batteries. Then December 27, the collection targets for portable batteries will be established. August 28th, then the performance standards become applicable, more lead restriction, and then December 2030, last quality standards become applicable, and then the whole regulation has been rolled out. So that's like a 6 years project, so to speak.
So I like it because you said, yeah, at that moment you have to do this, at that moment you have to do that, etc.
Yeah, it's a whole roadmap.
Now I'm thinking about EU MDR. If they have done that on that way, would that work for us also? If they had done it also on that way, to say, first 2021 we start with that, 2020 February 2022 we do this, etc., and we implement slowly the EU MDR.
Yeah, that would have been nice. That would be nice, right? Yeah, that would have been a better idea. I mean,
instead of one day to say today you do everything. No, it's like phased with the multiple.
Yeah, but you see that even the EU legislator can learn. I mean, with the MDR IVDR amendment that entered into force today, actually, as we speak, they also learned that it is a good idea to not have a one date fits all notified body application date for legacy devices. So with the IVDR, with the MDR, all legacy devices needed to have their technical documentation and quality system in the door at 26 May 2024, which was the existential date for medical device manufacturers. But for the IVDR, they've now put in a system where it is phased. So it starts with 26 May 2025 from the top of my head for the Class D, and then 26 for Class C, and then 27 for Class B and Class A sterile. So that gives the IVD notified bodies a lot more, let's say, room to divide. But this is for another podcast.
Exactly.
But yeah, so
now on the timeline that you are mentioning now, like all those things. So August is the first timeline that will be arriving.
That's a big one, yeah.
Exactly. So at that moment, does it mean that any manufacturer that are purchasing batteries have to verify there is a CE mark, there is this, there is that, there is that? I mean, do they have some?
Yeah, the importer and the economic operator obligations will enter into effect in August. That's correct.
So what for the people that are listening now, what exactly they have to do by August, or what they have to ask?
Yeah, that's basically the Article 13 and Article 14 MDR and IVDR equivalent for the batteries regulation. So and Article 25, by the way. So Article 25 is you need to know the previous and the next economic operator in the supply chain. So for the importer, what you need to do, that's Article 41 of the regulation. So you need to verify conformity of the requirements with restriction on substances, performance, durability, labeling, and marking. Well, a lot of that you can't do because that enters into force only later, right? As we've just established. But you also need to verify that technical documentation is drawn up and that the conformity assessment procedure has been carried out. That already applies. You need to verify that the battery bears CE marking. Applies already. Verify that the battery is accompanied by the required instructions for use and safety information. Applies already. Verify that the batteries are identifiable. Yep. and all these other things. And like with the MDR and the IVDR, you need to also keep, and that's where it actually goes further for importers under the batteries regulation. You need to keep the declaration of conformity, technical documentation. So actually, you need to get the technical documentation from the manufacturer.
So you need to have it. You need to receive it and to have it physically.
Yes. Well, you need access to it. You need to be able to give it to the authorities, and also, and then for when that becomes applicable, an outside body verification report for due diligence and other audit reports. So this is actually quite a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I will bet that basically no company has this in their OEM agreements, for example, if they are an importer.
No, I'm sure, and I'm afraid when I hear all what you are mentioning that maybe a lot of people are not aware of that. And mainly there will be, if for the people that want to apply it, maybe there will be some disruption on their supply chain because maybe the supplier will not be ready at all for this kind of thing. So yeah, there are maybe a lot of questions here.
You can be sure that because my experience with my medical devices clients is that basically nobody is ready for this.
So is there
and
any
it's only
sanctions?
A month to August.
So yeah, is there any sanctions? For example, I am a manufacturer, I need to purchase battery. I was not able to source from a real one.
This is one of the funny questions I also got because there's also an article like Article 112, I think, in the medical devices regulation that says that member states need to establish the local sanctions for contravention of the regulation, and that needs to happen in 2025 or something in the batteries regulation. So several people ask me like, oh, but if we need to do all kinds of stuff in August, but we can't be fined before for August next year, then does it basically mean that we can do what we want? Now, the problem there is that, the regulation still prohibits it. So that means that even if the sanctions are not implemented, like the fines, for example, authorities can still prohibit it. Even though it will probably be chaos, and even though authorities probably will have more important things on their mind, still it may be that, for example, your batteries or your devices will be held up at customs, because customs is usually quite a lot better in checking if devices are in conformity with the regulations when they are declared at customs for import. And this is where I would expect the most problems for devices companies, not so much with local competent authorities that are suddenly going after you and seizing batches of devices from the market, but customs is your worst enemy, I would say, potentially.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so as you've said, the importers, distributors, all the ones that are purchasing batteries from outside of Europe, mainly can have some problems at the border, and checking everything before it's arriving maybe can be a good point. Because yeah, I suppose you are purchasing a lot of batteries, they are sitting at the customs and you can do nothing with them. If they are not compliant, they will never enter. So it's not like you are expecting them to enter. They are not compliant, they will not enter at all.
Yeah, it's a big write-off.
Exactly. It's a big write-off, as you mentioned. So
you just given that money to me, rather.
Yeah. So now, if you have to give an advice now to the people, what they should do now today, if I can say, to be trying to be in compliance to all this.
Well, legally speaking, I think there's two things you need to do. There's the legal path and the regulatory path. So the regulatory path is obviously know what you should be compliant with when. So the first big deadline is August 2024, so next month.
Yeah.
And have a plan B, plan C, plan D in case you run into issues with that. So then there is the supply chain part, and this is mainly the legal part. So if you are a manufacturer of a device, you need to check with OEM suppliers that they use compliant batteries, because otherwise it becomes your problem. If you are a distributor or otherwise you are in a bigger conglomerate or you buy devices from outside the union, then you have importer and distributor obligations. And this is also something that needs to be accounted for in distribution contracts for the medical device if they are integrated, and for the batteries themselves if they are replaceable and removable and are also sold, let's say, as a part for the medical device specifically. So you need to revisit both your OEM agreements and all the distribution agreements in the supply chain, because there is a lot of information that needs to go up and down the supply chain that I basically see distribution agreements not account for. This was a problem already with the MDR and the IVDR, because it also has a very cooperative supply chain for post-market surveillance purposes. Same for the batteries regulation, basically. So if you've not accounted for that in your distribution agreements, this is something that and OEM agreements is something that you need to do. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the immediate work to do.
So we talked about batteries. Now you also mentioned devices with batteries inside. So if I purchase devices that contain some batteries, they are also subject to maybe being blocked.
You're importing the battery that's in the device. Yep.
Wow.
That's an important point that you make, because this is why the batteries regulation is so important. You cannot assume that just because a battery is incorporated in your medical device, that the battery regulation doesn't apply. It's good that you raise this point, because this is something that basically every regulatory professional, and I know this joke, I've made this before, take your management out to the parking lot, open the car door, put their hand in the frame, slam it shut, and say, battery regulation applies to all batteries, also the incorporated ones.
So
and if they then start yelling and begging you to release them, then you say, no, first answer the question. Does the battery regulation applies to incorporated batteries? And if they say no, then you just let them suffer a bit more. And if they say yes, here is budget for you to actually do something about this, then you say, okay, now I set you free.
I think it's really an important point here, because I suppose there are a lot of manufacturers that are in the European Union that are purchasing those devices or products.
Of course.
That.
Yeah,
and
they're made in China and then imported. Yeah, and
exactly.
That's also why I mentioned OEM agreements, because a lot of companies don't even make their devices themselves. They just have them made by a third party that prints their name on it, and then they add the IFU, and then they sell it in Europe. Also, for these batteries, they are a manufacturer of the device, and then they have the device imported in Europe. They may be an importer, they may be a distributor. All this stuff applies.
So agreement is one thing. Then they should ask for a declaration of conformity that is integrating this regulation. Then.
Yep. Which you can then integrate in your own declaration of conformity. This is, for example, part of the regulatory part for the MDR and the IVDR. And I actually have received the first questions of notified bodies if I can train them on how to audit for MDR and IVDR companies actually implementing the battery regulation requirements correctly in their own MDR and IVDR compliance, because the battery is an essential component of the device, so it needs to be mentioned in the technical documentation. You can't use non-compliant components for a device. That's not how it works. So this is basically this is why this is such a big thing.
Exactly. And to go back on what you said, just notified bodies, if, for example, from the 1st of October, you have an audit, they can, if you have some batteries integrated in your device, they can ask you questions about that.
Yes, for the battery regulation requirements that are already applicable. Yep.
So,
and they probably will, because the first ones I know are already thinking about this. So it may end up in their audit plans. Yeah.
So I think it's really important because even for me, because I know that some customers will maybe call and ask, "Oh, I got a non-conformity or major non-conformity because I was not following this battery regulation. What are we talking about here? Can you tell us more about that, etc., etc." So I think it's why this podcast episode is really important for people to understand more about this, to make a gap assessment, as we are calling that, or usually check
Mhm.
what you have, check what is missing, ask questions now, or contact all your suppliers now. And if you discover now that your supplier of products or of batteries are not complying at all to this EU regulation, EU battery regulation, what to do now?
Yeah, that sounds really stupid, but then you need another supplier that is compliant, or you need a very strong steel nerves to take the risk that you are
Yeah,
going to take. Yeah. Yeah, and also what I think is important is to also train your OEM in the sense that you can also, if you have an OEM that doesn't understand but is willing to learn and also adapt, that you help them go through this whole, let's say, battery regulation journey. And notified bodies, I mean, they are not supposed to audit your whether your directive meets the conformity assessment requirements under the batteries regulation, because that's actually not what they are supposed to do if they are an MDR notified body. But they can check if the components that you use are compliant, because that is a requirement.
so it's the same as following any other legislation like machine
Yeah,
legislation, ECN,
it's it's like you
OEMs.
use ROAS,
Exactly.
ROHS compliant circuit boards. I mean, if you use circuits boards that are not ROHS compliant, then your device is not compliant.
Exactly. No, it's really important to understand that MDR is mainly the main legislation for medical devices, but we have other legislation that are collateral and that you have still to follow. And notified bodies can check also that compliance to for the components to that. Okay. Anything else?
And of course, you need a procedure in your quality system to follow for your batteries if they are compliant. So this, as if I were a notified body, I would also check for that.
Exactly. So if so the keyword is that if you have battery somewhere on your products, this is really for you and you have to act now. August is in a few weeks now from
Yeah.
now. So yeah, this is mainly something. And if you have any issues, I think you can contact Erik Vollebregt and he will be happy
Also
as
for
a customer.
batteries, there's CE marking, and CE means call Eric. So again, I was successful in my business development for that regulation as well. Yeah.
So yeah, don't hesitate to contact Erik for that. Anything else, Erik?
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a busy summer, right? Because
Yeah.
lots of things happening. I'm still working on updating my book, the Enriched MDR and IVDR, which is a hell of a job because
I
things keep
imagine.
changing all the time. So I need to find a good way, a good point to say, okay, this is enough for a third edition, and then I'm going to just publish the next edition. Yeah, and otherwise, yeah, I mean, what can I? It's so funny, actually, for a regulation, for a training on the batteries regulation. I actually asked Claude 3.5 Sonnet, my favorite AI to use, to make a sarcastic meme about the batteries regulation. And it was so funny. He said, well, I don't make images, but I can describe to you what a sarcastic meme about the batteries regulation should look like. So he says, okay, imagine a picture of a person drowning in a sea of paperwork with battery symbols floating around them. The text should read, top text for the meme, EU, semicolon, we need more sustainable batteries. And bottom text, also EU, semicolon, here's 100 pages of regulation. Which is typically the EU solution, of course, that if we have a problem, we need more regulation. But then Claude gives a very nice turn on it. It says, well, this concept sarcastically highlights the complexity and bureaucracy often associated with EU regulations, even when they have good intentions. Remember, says Claude, while this is a sarcastic take, the batteries regulation does aim to address important sustainability issues. you have the ability to create this meme yourself. Be mindful that sarcasm can sometimes be misinterpreted, especially on sensitive topics. Story of my life. Anyway, this was an AI created sarcastic meme, which I thought was pretty funny,
No,
but also the way he spins it is quite funny.
No,
too.
I think it's true, and yeah, it's there are sarcastic, but there's a lot of true on all this, and yeah, we have more and more and more papers and more things to follow. So it's why we have to keep up to date. We have to understand. We have to interpret. We have to explain, because yeah, I can imagine that people that are listening say, "Oh, again a new thing, again a new law, and again a new rule to follow." So yeah, it's can be sometimes a lot, and I understand people about that.
Yeah, but I think it's important to convince management that this is also, it's an important regulatory issue, and this is precisely why devices manufacturers should properly resource their regulatory departments, because this is something I often see with clients, is that these departments are under-resourced. People do not have sufficient resources to keep informed, and also to meet compliance, and that's bad corporate risk management from my perspective.
Exactly. So, as said, if you have any questions on this topic, so you can contact Erik Vollebregt. All the details will be on the show notes. And yeah, if you have also some comments, don't hesitate to place that on the LinkedIn page or YouTube channel or anywhere. And if you have questions, I will send that also to Erik directly. Okay, Erik, it was really a pleasure. Thank you again for all that. And have a happy summer. And maybe we'll see tomorrow if there is a new legislation, a new law that is popping up from the UK.
You never know.
Thanks, Erik. I wish you a nice day.
Take care. Bye-bye.